Story 1. I worked for this tech company for almost 7 years. It was my first job out of college. Great company, huge growth, great benefits, and most importantly, an incredible boss. The boss was super helpful and responsive, always had the team's back, went out of his way to not micromanage, didn't care as long as the work got done, borderline force people to take paid time off, we have unlimited, and I averaged 30-40 days off a year, and believed in giving good workers big raises and promotions. In the last 3 years, I got 9%, 13%, and a promotion and 7% raises. We worked remotely through COVID, and I asked to change my contract to fully remote so I could leave the high cost of living city where the office was based to go back to my hometown. The boss approved the change, and when human resources tried to do a cost of living adjustment to my salary, the boss told them no because I'd be doing the same work in my new location. The boss was so good that on our team of 16 people, the lowest tenured was 3.5 years. I'd been offered several other jobs with salary increases throughout the years, but could never bring myself to leave. Myself and one other person on my team had specialized in working on very complex and involved projects. These were significantly different from the team's normal day-to-day work. We'd been doing the complex projects for 4+ years and were the knowledge base for the company in that area. The boss left that area completely to us to manage. As the volume picked up, we added and trained 2 more people to our little sub-team to help out. None of these projects went out to the customers without one of us 4 being involved. They were super complex $100 zizens to millions lost if a mistake was made. And since it was the fastest growing part of the business by far, we were super busy. Now, around 2 years ago, the boss's boss gets promoted from his vice president role up to a senior vice president spot and hires a new vice president. This new vice president comes in and tries to change a lot very quickly. He tries to make everything a trackable metric, even where it really doesn't make sense. For example, tracking the number of projects each person on my team did every month. It counted as one even if it was super complex and took 2 weeks, or if it was very simple with an existing customer and took an hour. He wanted each project to go out faster, even if they weren't due for a week. We were supposed to get them out in under 3 days. He tried to force my boss to assign work to the team, instead of us all picking up from a central queue as we could, etc. The boss pushed back as much as possible, but was getting criticized constantly by the new vice president because the useless metrics the vice president wanted us tracked by did not meet his super unrealistic expectations. This was despite my boss's team being the most experienced and efficient in the company and doing significantly more volume and more complex work than any other team. About 9 months ago, the boss had enough of just getting consistently criticized by the vice president and took a new job and left. The boss had been with the company for 13 years and was one of the first few 100 employees. My whole team was devastated. We all instantly started lobbying for the most tenured person on our team to get promoted into that role, as she would have the same philosophy as the boss that just left. The vice president interviews the most tenured and a bunch of external candidates. He goes with someone from his previous company. Now this lady will be referred to as difficult boss from here on out for soon-to-be obvious reasons. She came in and completely destroyed the team from top to bottom. She changed processes that had been perfected for years, did not listen or care about what anyone else had to say. She started micromanaging to the extreme. Team morale dropped like a rock. It took less than a month for the team's output to crater due to all of her changes. The team went from the best in the company to the worst. It took difficult boss about 2 months to get to my smaller sub-team and try to rework our processes. Difficult boss started micromanaging projects, having no idea what she's doing and causing all kinds of issues and delays. She started getting on us about our metrics being the worst on the team. This was despite us working on the super complex projects that took 100 times longer on average than most of the work the rest of the team did. Difficult boss told us that if we didn't meet the expected metrics, we would be put on performance improvement plans. So we decided to comply and focused all of our efforts on simple projects to meet the metric X number of projects completed per month per person, and left the complex ones sitting in the queue. This caused chaos as my small sub-team suddenly stopped picking up complex projects and just focused on completing simple projects to get our metrics up. Very quickly, the sales team is freaking out because deals are getting delayed and their huge commission checks from the complex projects are being put in jeopardy. When they came to us to ask when we were going to complete the complex projects, we all gave the same response. Difficult boss has told us we have to focus all of our efforts on meeting metric X, so we will only be doing that. Unfortunately, that means we can no longer complete the complex projects. Please contact Difficult Boss for help getting them completed. This did not go over well with her or the vice president as he started to get complaints as well. They called a meeting and told us we had to go back to doing the complex projects. We refused as that made it impossible to meet the metrics they created to measure our performance. They refused to drop the metric, but still insisted we work on the complex ones as we were the only ones with the knowledge. We still refused. This resulted in a lot more complaints from sales until the senior vice president got involved. The senior vice president was the one who created the complex sub-team to begin with and sided with us against the vice president and difficult boss. He said we were not to be measured by the metrics and can go back to managing the complex stuff without fear of being put on a performance improvement plan. So we did. At this point, the other 3 people on the sub-team had seen the writing on the wall and were all actively applying and trying to leave as soon as possible. They were all office-based in the high cost of living area still. Difficult boss changed the team from coming 1-2 days a week as needed to mandatory 3 days in the office most company policy would let her. So they got a lot more of her criticism than I did remotely. I had not been applying because I was distracted. My old boss had approved 2 weeks of vacation for my wedding honeymoon before he left. This happened to occur about 3 months after Difficult Boss started and about a month after the whole performance improvement plan blow-up. Difficult Boss was very upset at how we showed her up in front of the senior vice president and was doing everything she could to make our life miserable. In that month, the other super experienced guy and my best friend on the sub-team got a new job and left no notice. And one of the other guys on the sub-team has put in his notice and only had a week left. We were already slammed and still behind from the performance improvement plan fiasco, so losing half the sub-team just made that worse. Plus, with morale so low, we didn't bother to put in any extra effort anymore. In fact, the whole team was significantly behind as 6 of the 16 people had left or were on their notice periods at that point. So Difficult Boss decided that she was canceling my already approved wedding leave because of how far the team was behind. She told me over Zoom. I told her there was no chance I'm missing my wedding and honeymoon for work, and I'm taking the full leave, and it's up to her if she wants to lose another person from the sub-team for 2 weeks or permanently. She argued, yelled, and threatened until I just left the Zoom call. She followed up with an email officially notifying me my leave was canceled, and if I didn't show up, it would be considered job abandonment. I called her bluff and replied, copying the vice president and senior vice president and some other sales vice presidents who I worked with regularly, explaining the situation, it's my wedding honeymoon, and that I appreciated the opportunity, but was quitting immediately with no notice due to the disrespect from Difficult Boss. I got messages from the senior vice president and several of the sales vice presidents almost immediately asking me not to quit. The email chain itself blew up with complaints about how my team was mismanaged by Difficult Boss and how now more complex deals were going to get lost because I wouldn't be there at all to work on them, etc. The senior vice president eventually shut it down, but it was an interesting read. I didn't reply to the messages or do any work the rest of that day. Just turned everything off and went to a bar and had a good time. I woke up the next day late in the morning and very hungover to a few voicemails on my phone from the senior vice president asking me to call him. I called back in the early afternoon and talked to the senior vice president. He was very understanding, asked me to come back. He listened to all my complaints and eventually made an offer. Basically, if I came back and worked the rest of the week and tried to train a few team members to work on complex stuff to cover while I was gone, he would give me a $3,000 wedding bonus. I would get my full paid time off. And when I got back, difficult boss would leave me alone and let me manage the complex stuff and pick 2 more people to permanently train back onto the sub-team to backfill what we had lost. I accepted weddings are very expensive, so I tried to train people to cover for me impossible tasks, then leave on my paid time off. I had a great wedding and honeymoon. The vice president called me a few times when the 4th guy from my sub-team quit, with no notice about 1.5 weeks in, but I ignored him and didn't respond. I come back refreshed and ready for the challenging situation I know is waiting. It was chaos. All the salespeople were messaging and emailing me about all the complex things they needed done 2 weeks ago. The people I quickly trained before leaving hadn't been able to do almost anything. There was a huge backlog for the entire team as half of the original 16-person team was gone at this point. I turned off my messaging app and emailed the sales vice presidents directly asking them to give me a prioritized list of all the complex deals they needed done. Got the list and started working through it in my normal working hours, nothing more. Difficult boss never tried to talk to me or interfere. The vice president did a few times. At one point, he tried to make me work weekends to catch up. I refused. This went on for about a month or so. Difficult boss never mentioned me training people to replace my sub-team, and I never brought it up. They did, however, have the larger team try some of the smaller complex projects to help get them out. They also hired some new people for the larger team. The normal 4-6 month training process my old boss developed was ignored, and the new hires were just thrown in the deep end. This resulted in new hires making mistakes that cost the company a lot of money. This brought us to annual bonus and raise time. I had started frantically job hunting as soon as I got back from the honeymoon. I got some interviews, was in some later stages, but no offers yet. I had a Zoom meeting invite from difficult boss to go over my bonus raise. She decided it would be a great idea to give me 80% of my expected bonus lowest possible and a 0% raise. She justified it with a bunch of nonsense, not a team player, metrics bad, blaming me for mistakes made by new hires, etc. I didn't really argue or care at that point. At that point, I really quiet quit. Cut my daily output to below half, just did the bare minimum, and waited for the bonus to come in with my next paycheck 2 weeks later. At this point, the sales team is getting upset because the complex stuff basically isn't getting done. I had almost caught up on the important ones before the raise bonus, but with me barely working, everything was falling behind again. Difficult boss sensed weakness and showed up on one of the progress calls I had with sales. The project was running about 1.5 weeks behind at that point. She started criticizing me on the call in front of everyone, saying I was lazy and not doing my job, etc. I let her rant, then just said, "If you give me the lowest bonus possible and a 0% raise, you get 0% effort in return. You can complete this project since I'm so terrible at my job," and left the call. She tried a few more times on email chains, etc., to call me out for not working, and I just replied with the same thing. I refused to join her Zoom calls or respond to her on the messaging app, and just responded with a 0% effort comment on every email. This infuriated her. I still hadn't gotten another job offer, but was really confident I was about to get one soon. So when the vice president set up a Zoom call with me, I joined. He tried to play nice and ask what the problems were and pretended to be on my side. I told him for a 0% raise, I'm giving 0% effort, and he pretended like he had no idea how I ended up with that raise bonus. He has to approve the bonus raise amounts. I called him out on his nonsense and told him he gets what he pays for. He then threatened to fire me if I didn't go back to my old level of output, and said the people I had been training in complex projects could take over for me soon, so I wasn't as necessary as I thought. I laughed and asked him what he was talking about. I hadn't been training anyone. He went quiet and muted. He was clearly messaging difficult boss asking about the training, because he unmuted a few minutes later and changed his entire attitude. He agreed it was awful of difficult boss to do that to my bonus raise and asked what he could do to make it right. I didn't care at that point and knew he needed me more than I needed him, so I told him I need a 25% raise and 150% of the bonus on that new salary, or I was quitting immediately. He tried to say that was ridiculous and could never happen, etc. So I bluffed and told him I already had another job offer and was leaving anyway. He asked me to wait, and he'd bring the senior vice president onto the call. The senior vice president tried to talk my demand down. At that point, I realized it wasn't worth it. I refused the significantly lower counter offer, thanked the senior vice president for everything he did for me, and said I was quitting immediately. The vice president tried to say I'll never get a good reference if I don't at least work a notice period. I just told him my ex-boss would give me a glowing recommendation of my time here, so I didn't care and logged off. The senior vice president tried to get me to come back a few times over the next week or so, but I refused. A few weeks later, I got a job offer and accepted. I've been working at the new company for a while now, and it's pretty subpar. Better than the old company, but nowhere close to what I had before with my old boss. Although the old boss reached out and said he might have a position opening up in his new company in a month or two that I should apply for. So I'm looking forward to that. I've heard from people who are still on my old team that it's a complete disaster at my old job. They are losing millions from not having the knowledge base to correctly complete the complex projects. They reached out to the other experienced guy from the sub-team and offered him a huge raise to come back after I quit. He refused. Everyone left on my old team is trying to leave as soon as possible, and everything, even the simple stuff, is weeks overdue. Apparently, difficult boss is getting thrown under the bus by the vice president and will be fired soon. Story 2. I was just a little kid, about 7 or 8 years old, when this all went down. Back then, we had these cool sherbet candies that came in plastic containers shaped like fruit. You know, orange-shaped ones for orange flavor, lemon-shaped for lemon, that kind of thing. I loved those treats and often brought them to school for break time. There was this boy in my class, let's call him the bully, who always bugged me about sharing my sherbet. He wouldn't take no for an answer, and even threatened me sometimes. I usually ended up running away or hiding just to enjoy my candy in peace. Me, can I please eat my sherbet alone? Bully, no way, you have to share it with me. Give it here, or else. Me, but it's mine, I don't want to share. Bully, I don't care. Hand it over, or you'll be sorry. This went on for weeks, and I was getting really tired of it. Then, one Christmas, my brothers and I got these cool Snoopy-shaped soaps. They were so neat that we didn't want to use them as actual soap. But then I had an idea. I took one of my Snoopy soaps and grated it into little flakes. Then, I put those flakes into one of the empty fruit-shaped containers from my sherbet. The next day, I brought it to school, knowing the bully would probably bother me again. Sure enough, as soon as break time came around, the bully spotted me and came over. Bully, hey, what have you got there? Another sherbet? Me, yeah, it's orange flavor. Bully, give me some. Now. Me, okay. But just have a little bit, all right? I handed him the container, and he looked so smug. He tipped almost all of it into his hand and shoved it in his mouth. For about a second, he looked really pleased with himself. Then his face changed, and he ran off without a word. I felt pretty good about my trick, but by lunchtime, things had gotten a bit out of hand. My classmates kept coming up to me with worried looks. Classmate 1, did you poison the bully? Me, what? No, it was just soap. Classmate 2, soap? Why did you give him soap? Me, because he always steals my candy. I wanted to teach him a lesson. This went on for a while, and I had to keep explaining what happened. But then, at the end of lunch, I got called to the headmaster's office. Now, this was serious business. Our headmaster was a scary, serious man, and being sent to his office was never a good thing. Headmaster, what happened with you and the bully? He claims you poisoned him. Me, I didn't poison him, sir. He always bothers me for my sherbet, and he threatens me if I don't give it to him. so I ground up some soap and put it in a sherbet container. I told him to only have a little bit, but he took almost all of it. As I was explaining, I noticed something weird. The headmaster's mouth kept twitching at the corners. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. This scary man looked like he was trying really hard not to laugh, but I just kept talking, thinking I was in big trouble no matter what. When I finished, the headmaster spoke in a funny voice. "Headmaster, I see. Don't do it again." Then he quickly shooed me out of his office. I was shocked that I didn't get in trouble, but I wasn't about to question it. As I left, I could have sworn I heard a muffled laugh from behind the door. For weeks after that, I imagined the headmaster telling this story to the other teachers in the staff room, all of them laughing about the boy who tricked the bully into eating soap. The best part? The bully never bothered me for my sherbet again. I guess he learned his lesson after literally washing his mouth out with soap. From that day on, I could enjoy my treats in peace, and the bully kept his distance. Looking back, I realize it was a bit mean to trick him like that. But when you're a kid dealing with a bully, sometimes you do what you have to do to protect yourself. And hey, at least I gave him a minty fresh mouth in the process. Story 3. I work at a small marina, a quiet place with boats gently swaying in the water and seagulls cawing overhead. It's a peaceful job, one that lets me enjoy the soothing rhythm of the waves and the serene beauty of the ocean. I'm not wealthy, but I've got a cozy little house by the shore and a job that suits me just fine. One sunny afternoon, a big boat pulls up to our docks. It's a real beauty, the kind that turns heads. A shiny, expensive vessel that would make anyone envious. The owner, a burly man with sunglasses and a cap, steps off the boat and walks up to me. "Fill her up," he says gruffly. His voice carries a sense of entitlement, but I don't think much of it. Maybe he's just having a bad day. I nod and start pumping gas into his boat, watching the numbers on the pump spin higher and higher. When I finally finish, he comes back to the counter. I punch in the amount and tell him, "That'll be $400. He takes out a wad of $100 bills, counts out 4 of them, and hands them to me. They feel crisp and look legitimate, so I give him a polite smile and say, "Have a great day." He smirks and replies, "Oh, I always do." A week goes by, and I'm called into my boss's office. He's a stern man with a grizzled beard, and his expression is one of pure frustration. "Those $100 bills that guy paid with last week, they were all fake," he grumbles. I can hardly believe it. I'd accepted those bills without a second thought, and now it turns out they're counterfeit. My heart sinks. "Is there anything we can do, boss?" He sighs and shakes his head. No way to track him down. It's like he just stole $400 worth of gas and got away with it. Time passes, and I try to put the incident behind me. But then, about a month and a half later, the same guy strolls back into the marina. He must have thought he'd pulled off the perfect heist, that no one would ever recognize him. As soon as I spot him, my mind races. I can't let him leave. Not this time. "Sarah, call the police right now," I whisper to my coworker as discreetly as I can. She looks at me, puzzled. "Why? What's going on?" I point to the man, who's browsing our store like he owns the place. "He's the guy who paid with the counterfeit bills last month. We can't let him get away again." Sarah nods and hurries to the phone. She dials 911 while I keep an eye on our unsuspecting guest. I remember my boss telling me that it's the policy to get the name and phone number of customers using free dockage and to ask them to leave their keys with us. My heart races, an idea forming in my mind. If I can just get his information and keep him here until the police arrive, we might finally catch this guy. The man walks up to me, and a smug grin crosses his face. "I'd like to dock my boat for an hour or so," he says. I give him a nod. "Of course, sir. But it's our policy to take your name and phone number for our records, and we'll need your boat keys in case we need to move it." He raises an eyebrow, but he complies, scribbling down his information and handing over the keys. I take them with a smile and watch as he walks away toward the docks. About 15 minutes later, the police arrive. They approach my boss, who points them in the direction of the man. My boss then turns to me and instructs, "Call him back to the boat and make sure he stays there." I'm feeling a mix of emotions, anger for being duped before and excitement that we might finally catch him. I pick up the phone and dial the number he left. "Hello," he answers. "Hey, this is me from the marina," I say, trying to sound as casual as possible. "It seems there's an issue with your engine. It's smoking." I can practically hear his heart skip a beat. "What? Are you serious?" I nod, even though he can't see me. "Yeah, it's not looking good, man. You better come back quickly." Engines on boats are expensive, and this one, in particular, is a top-of-the-line 350 horsepower Yamaha. He rushes back to the marina, panic in his eyes. As he approaches his boat, the expression on his face is priceless. He had no idea what he was walking into. 2 police officers are waiting for him, and I can't help but enjoy the moment. He tries to play it cool, acting like he's done nothing wrong, but his act doesn't last long. The officers arrest him and inform him of the reason why he's being detained. It turns out he has almost $2,000 in counterfeit $100 bills on him. He's shocked, stammering, "I had no idea those bills were fake. This is ridiculous." One of the officers, a no-nonsense woman with a stern face, replies, "Well, sir, ignorance is not an excuse under the law. You'll have to explain all of this to the authorities." My boss, who's been watching the entire scene unfold, turns to me and nods with approval. We've finally caught the guy who thought he could steal from us and get away with it. As the officers lead him away in handcuffs, I can't resist a little grin. It's not every day you get to be the hero of your own story, but today, I've helped bring a would-be thief to justice. Story 4. This happened a while back when I was working as a server at a local restaurant. One day, my manager asked me to pick up some office supplies from Walmart before my shift. So there I was, dressed in my all-black server uniform, complete with a black apron and kitchen shoes, browsing the home goods aisle for a basket. I was minding my own business when this woman approached me. "Woman, hey, can you tell me where the alarm clocks are?" Me, "Oh, I'm not sure, but they must be nearby since we are in the home goods area. Maybe try the next aisle." I continued looking at baskets, thinking that was the end of our interaction. But oh, how wrong I was. "Woman, why don't you look it up for me?" Me, "Oh, sorry. I don't have cell service in here, but I'm sure someone else can help you look for them." Woman, "Do you have a problem with helping a customer look for an item?" At this point, I realized she thought I worked there. I tried to explain the situation politely. Me, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. I actually don't work here, haha." I gestured to my server outfit, thinking that would clear things up. But nope, she wasn't having it. "Woman, I think you do, and you just don't want to help me. Show me where the alarm clocks are." Me, "Mom, I'm sorry I don't work here. I work at the restaurant across the street, and I really need to find this item I'm looking for and get to work." That's when things really took a turn for the worse. "Woman, you are at work. Go get your manager right now." I was shocked. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. Me, "No. You can go get a manager. I don't work here, and I really don't have time for this." Woman, "I'm going to call corporate on you and tell them that you are refusing to service a customer. How would you like that?" Me, "Go right ahead. Again, I don't work here. I hope you find your alarm clock." I grabbed a basket and started to walk away, hoping that would be the end of it. But oh no, she wasn't done with me yet. "Woman, get me your manager. Don't walk away from me." At this point, I'd had enough. I raised my voice, probably louder than I should have in a public place. "Me, I am a server at a restaurant. I do not work here. You'd think that would be enough, right? Wrong." This woman followed me all the way to the front of the store. As I was checking out my items at the self-checkout, she approached the employee there. "Woman, I need a manager to report an unprofessional employee." She pointed at me, and I held my breath, waiting for the employee's response. Self-checkout employee. That person doesn't work here? They are in a restaurant uniform and apron." The look on her face was priceless. I could see the anger and shock as she realized she was wrong. But even then, she couldn't let it go. "Woman, what's your manager's name at the restaurant? I'm still reporting you." I just ignored her and left the store, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. When I got to work, I told everyone what had happened. My coworkers were in stitches, and my manager thought it was crazy. "Manager, don't worry. If she calls, I'll know what's up. You won't be in trouble." I was grateful for my manager's understanding, but I still couldn't shake off the surreal encounter. It was my first time dealing with an entitled person like that, and I hoped it would be my last. But at least I got a good story out of it, right? The whole experience left me wondering how people can be so convinced they're right, even when all evidence points to the contrary. I guess some folks just can't admit when they're wrong. At least now I have a better understanding of those crazy person in Walmart stories you see online. Trust me, they're real, and they're out there. Story 5. It was Christmas Eve, and as usual, we were trying to tire out our kids before bedtime. We had a tradition of keeping them busy all day so they'd fall asleep quickly, making it easier for Santa to do his job. This particular year, we decided to take them to a laser tag arena. When we arrived, it was pretty quiet. There were only 3 groups: our family of 4, another family of 4, and a woman with her son. Let's call her Karen and her kid, the entitled kid. All the children were around 10 or 11 years old. As the first game started, we all scattered into the arena. Us adults were deliberately playing badly, ignoring our not-so-stealthy kids who were creeping up behind us, giggling loudly. But Karen, she was on a mission. Karen bulldozed her way through the arena, shooting everyone in sight. She seemed determined to clear the path for her son. The problem was, once she shot us, our packs turned off, so when the entitled kid tried to shoot us, it didn't register. Karen was racking up all the points her son could have gotten. At the end of the first game, the entitled kid threw a fit because he was at the bottom of the scoreboard with more deaths than kills. Karen, on the other hand, was near the top. By the third game, Karen was getting angry. This prompted the kids and us childish adults to keep targeting her. Instead of returning to base to respawn, she started using herself as a human shield so her son could shoot from behind her. My son, hey, that's against the rules. Karen, tough. She just let the entitled kid keep shooting from behind her. After the game, Karen was gloating to everyone who scored lower than her son. Karen, see how great my son is? He's going to win the next one for sure. Me, but you were cheating. Karen, losers whine about rules. That did it. For the fourth game, we all silently agreed on a truce and decided to focus solely on Karen and her son. We covered all the exits from the spawn point, making sure to stay outside the no-go zone to comply with the rules. By the end of the game, Karen and the entitled kid were back at the bottom of the scoreboard. The only deaths in the game were theirs, and the rest of us had all the kills. Karen was furious. She started yelling at everyone. Karen, you're all cheaters. This isn't fair. The marshal came over to see what the commotion was about. Marshal, what seems to be the problem? Karen, they're all ganging up on us. It's not fair. Marshal, I've been watching the game. They're playing within the rules, unlike you using yourself as a human shield earlier. Karen, that's ridiculous. I demand a refund. While Karen was shouting at the staff, demanding her money back, the rest of us decided to play a couple more games. It was funny to see how quickly the other family, who were complete strangers to us, had become our allies against Karen and her son. As we were leaving, I couldn't help but chuckle at the situation. Here we were, on Christmas Eve, and instead of spreading goodwill, we'd all banded together to teach a lesson to an entitled parent and her kid. But in a way, it did bring out a kind of Christmas spirit, just not the one you'd expect. The other dad caught my eye as we were heading out. and we both grinned. Without saying a word, we knew we were thinking the same thing. Sometimes, the best way to deal with entitled behavior is to band together and beat them at their own game literally. As we drove home, our kids were buzzing with excitement, recounting every shot and dodge from the games. They were particularly proud of how they'd managed to outsmart the mean lady and her son. I had to admit, it was pretty satisfying to see Karen's plan backfire so spectacularly. That night, as we tucked our tired kids into bed, they fell asleep almost instantly, dreams of laser beams and victory dances probably floating through their heads. And as for us parents, well, we had a good laugh about it over a glass of eggnog, feeling pretty pleased with ourselves for not only tiring out the kids, but also delivering a bit of karmic justice in the process. It might not have been the most traditional way to spend Christmas Eve, but it sure was memorable. And who knows? Maybe Karen and her son learned a valuable lesson about fair play and good sportsmanship, though somehow I doubted it. But at least for one night, the good guys, or at least the less entitled ones, had won, and that felt like a pretty good Christmas gift to me.